Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Good, Bad, and Ugly of Business. I am your host, Catryn Becker. On this podcast, we talk about all different aspects of business, from interviewing private equity gurus like Adam Coffey to talking to the neighborhood business owner that lives down your street. On this episode, I have the immense pleasure of interviewing my first set of podcasters, and this is also the first time that I'm interviewing two people at once. So this is quite the firsts. They are incredible in the podcast space, and I'm so honored that they have taken time out of their day to be on this podcast and to speak to you. Their podcast is called The Good is in the Details, and I have Gwendolyn Dolske and Rudy Salo. Welcome to the show, you guys.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we're the honored ones. Thank you very much. We love being here and are looking forward to exploring business and our podcast and your podcast and podcasting in general with you.
And all of the things. And you guys have such an interesting background. So Gwendolyn, you are a professor of philosophy. I mean, I think for most people, the most they understand about philosophy is from watching The Good Place with...
Yeah.
Right? Like that's their understanding. Like they might know Socrates, they might know Aristotle, but they probably don't know any of the details or kind of fundamentals that go through that. So I think it's fascinating now that you're, bringing that up into podcasting and how that could be in sort of taken in the modern space of this ancient knowledge, this ancient wisdom. So how have you gotten to this space where now you are speaking on all these different topics?
Well, I think with philosophy, it's great that you mentioned that. We have talked about in the classroom and also on Good is in the Details, we've talked about the relationship between film and philosophy, and that film can actually be a way to bring moral tales or some sort of like scientific questions to a broad audience. And one of the things that we like to do is really to incorporate what it means to enjoy your life. What does happiness mean? Because when you have that, all of the other things, business, family, friends, it helps you to unfold and to enjoy your life. We teach people specific skill sets, but we don't teach people how to live well. And if you're not living well and enjoying your life, none of the other stuff matters. So we try to get to the heart of that and to, have a good time while we're doing it.
And Rudy, you're a lawyer and have been a lawyer for many years and in a sort of technical aspect, right? Working in infrastructure and finance.
It's very kind of you to say it so nicely. Technical. Some people would say what I do is boring, and it's very hard for me to disagree with that because of when I say what I actually do with my super technical specialty is municipal bonds. People are like, immediately go to sleep with that. What they don't realize is how important I am to their lives as a municipal bond attorney.
Humble brag.
Yes, big humble brag. Without municipal bonds, we would literally have no toilets, we would have no water, we would have no roads, we would have no hospitals, we would have no schools, we would have no bridges, we would have no airport. We would literally be living in caves and trees if I wasn't alive doing the boring stuff that I do.
We should all bow down.
We should. And nobody ever does. Everyone just kind of laughs at me as they should, because I'm partially kidding. You would think I should be 100% kidding, but I'm only partially kidding. But so, I really do. I love what I do. I love the end product of what I do. But there's a lot of other aspects to me that I needed to explore in order to be happy. And there was this period of time where, I went all in on practicing law, went all in on my career and found success there, but I didn't find happiness, right? Because that's all I did was my job. And I thought that success was the actual key to happiness. And then about 10 years ago, I realized that actually happiness has to be the key to success. And I started to explore my own personal happiness. And what I found was a lot of happiness in creativity, because I grew, you can see the bass guitar behind me. I was a musician in high school. I've always been very passionate about film. I've always been very passionate about writing. I've always been very passionate about and get a lot of joy from creativity. And I didn't have a lot of that when I was solely practicing law. So about 10 years ago, I started writing, I started speaking, I started screenwriting. I started really exploring creativity. And then I realized that happiness came from that. And then all of a sudden I had even more holistic success, both in my career and in my life, by finding happiness. So there's something that we really explore on Good is in the Details is like, how can you find, like, what is happiness, and how do you get success through happiness? And it's a big theme on our show, because we think that one of the ways to become happy is to gain knowledge in areas that you don't have, that you don't have a lot of knowledge in, and with that is one of the keys to happiness, is having knowledge. So yeah, I know I'm just kind of rattled off there, but I wanted to kind of tie that all into my life as a lawyer and have my life as a podcaster now. They are all intertwined.
I mean, it seems odd on the surface, but as you were explaining that and thinking a little bit deeper, it does make a lot of sense, because, I think to be a successful lawyer, you have to be really good at logic. And I think there's actually a lot of creativity in logic. And I think we do a lot of disservice to how we describe creativity. Because I was doing a workshop a couple of weeks ago to a group and talking about creativity. And this one person was like, oh gosh, but I'm not creative. And it's like, well, whoever told you that? And why does creativity only exist in arts and crafts? Because that was in her mind.
You nailed it. We literally, one of the themes that we talk about constantly is to never say that you're not creative.
Yeah.
Stop putting yourself into this box of, oh, well, if I don't paint, or I don't act, or if I don't play a musical instrument, I'm therefore not creative. And it's almost like the law of attraction. Like, if you say things like, I'm not creative, well, guess what? You're not creative, and you're convincing yourself that you're not creative. We advocate on practically almost every episode. We advocate for an expansive view of the definition of creativity, because we truly, through Good is in the Details, through my exploration, as I like to say, I'm a perpetual student on it, I have come to the realization that creativity is actually the key to happiness. And therefore, creativity is the key to success, because because happiness is the key to success. And it's so important to take an expansive view on creativity. Like, okay, so you put together this amazing birthday party for your children. You put a lot of thought into it. You made it amazing. You thought it outside of the box. That's creative. People don't take that into their consideration and their definition of creativity. So one thing that we absolutely advocate for through our podcast is taking an expansive view on the definition of creativity. I'm sure Gwen has thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, with your background in engineering, when I taught engineering ethics, there was kind of sometimes this resistance of like, we're engineers, everything is objective. And I would say, okay, this is true. Whether something functions or not is an objective fact. And when you're building something, but there are engineers all over the world. If engineering were 100% objective, then everywhere around the world would look exactly the same. And it doesn't.
Such a good point.
Because the design is a reflection of our values. And when it comes to creativity, so sometimes even in engineering ethics, we would read a little bit of fiction. And the importance is that every big step in engineering, in medicine, astrophysics, it can even be in fashion, traveling, is somebody rejecting what is in front of them and having a new idea, or saying that something is possible that hasn't been thought of before. And so that's where even something like with business or with engineering or even in medicine, where it might seem like, no, this is just objective, there is no creativity here, you have to exercise that part of your brain in order to move forward. Every step forward was somebody saying, why not? And we have to get comfortable with that. This is one of the things I think is important about education in general, that I think it's twofold. It is examining the knowledge that exists and then gaining the critical thinking skills to continue thinking about the possibilities and maybe even examining assumptions that brought us to the existing knowledge. You can't just learn everything that we know. We'd just be stagnant. You have to develop the skills to also question and examine the underscoring assumptions behind everything that we know. And that is also what makes life fun and enjoyable. It's like, and just for example, this is so silly, but I was listening to podcasts. I was listening to Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he was taking questions from people. And somebody had asked this question, how much does the earth weigh? And I was walking around on campus and I was listening to this and I thought, I have no idea. And the answer is it's weightless because it's in space. And I just smiled on my walk. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Why am I smiling? It's because it's just enjoyable to learn something new. And it's something that's outside of your scope, something that you didn't know you didn't know.
I love that so much. And I think, tying it back to the engineering piece of it, what drew me to engineering is the puzzle aspect. I love to be able to figure things out. I love to be able to look at things from other angles. And for a long time, I had to overcome the fact that like I'd be sitting in a room and everyone would be saying, yeah, we're going to do X. And I'm sitting there thinking like, why is no one talking about Y? Like, am I an idiot? No one else is mentioning this. And so I'd go up to someone at the end and like one-on-one, because I didn't have the confidence at the time to just say, what about why? And I would say, I was thinking and like, we could do this other thing. And they're like, oh my gosh, it's such a good idea. Why didn't you say it? And I was like, because everyone else seemed to be saying this one thing that was the right way. So I think there's a lot to overcome there, but you're absolutely right. I mean, science would never have progressed. We always think of science, especially now, in such a static way. And I think COVID really brought that to light as the scientists were learning more about the virus and how it developed and how it mutated. And they'd be like, oh, but 2 weeks ago you said this and now you're saying that. And it's like, because that's how science works.
Yeah. It's an evolution. It's observation, different ideas. We had a NASA engineer on the show, Tracy Drain, and she was just a phenomenal guest. And one of the things that she said is that you'll be in a room with people with different solutions to a problem. And you have to have the skills. And they're all engineers, right? They're all experts, but they all have different ideas. And one of the qualities of being an engineer is to be able to sit down and examine other points of view in order to come to a solution. And the more people who are offering potential solutions, the greater the dialogue and the greater the possibility for a solution.
And that's something I teach a lot to business leaders, is being able to clearly communicate what the end goal is, what is the vision you're trying to get to, and then allowing the creativity and the amazingness of the people that you've hired to come up with different solutions and different pathways to get there. Because so often it's like, this is the way you do it, and there's no wiggle room. And sometimes, there's reasons they do it certain ways, but sometimes those reasons don't exist anymore. And so it's important to have some sort of, loop where you can come back and re-examine that. But all of that to be said, I mean, you guys have been doing a podcast for 4 years, and Gwendolyn, you were doing one before that, I understand. And, podcasting was still pretty new. I mean, right now there's a lot of people doing it, but I know when I first heard about podcasting, I was so confused by it. I was like, so you just like listen to someone talk? Like, what is that? Obviously now I see the benefit of it as I host a show, but kind of what made you come into that, and what was the process like to start something new that you'd never done before?
I'm able to use some of the skills that I use in the classroom, where you're doing syllabus building and thinking about ideas to share. So it was a transferable skill. But really, I'm a total book nerd. And so one of the great things about this is that now I can reach out to authors of stuff that I've really enjoyed and say, hey, I have this educational podcast. Would you mind being a guest? I'd love to discuss your work. And then Rudy and I get an hour with this person. And that is absolutely amazing. So there was, and I think Rudy can speak to this as well, there was this desire for a personal intellectual growth. And there was also this desire to create a space where we have the art of dialogue very present, because sometimes people get isolated in their points of view, especially with social media and algorithms. And I think Rudy and I really wanted to create a space where there was a sharing of ideas that was delightful, informative, entertaining, and exciting. We're stepping outside of our comfort zone on nearly every single episode, where we are learning something that we didn't know. And we're both Gen Xers, we're both professionals, and there's still this room for growth. And so we really wanted to have a platform where people could enjoy that along with us and get something out of it. I would love it if when people finish the episode, they're thinking, oh, I didn't even know that that would be interesting, or that's really cool. And it's a good part of their day. What about you, Rudy?
I mean, I have the gift of gab. It's just, I love, one of my true pleasures is talking with people that I don't know and learning what they know. And I love asking questions. I'm an extremely curious person about many different ththings. Most of them, most of the questions that I ask are usually just because I like to get, I like to have deeper relationships. I like to have deeper conversations, and podcasting is the best place for that. It is a place where we can record and document a conversation, and learning how to have a conversation with somebody that has expertise beyond your own knowledge, I think is an amazing skill for everyone to have. And so I do think by listening to podcasts, because I have been listening to podcasts since they ever first came out. Like in the mid 2000s, I was a podcast fan, and I had been listening to them for well over a decade. I was probably listening to podcasts for 15 years almost, and before I started to become a guest on an automotive podcast. I'm very passionate about transportation. I do a column. I'm a transportation contributor for Forbes.com, and I have very strong particular views about transportation. And I really couldn't get them out there. Like I couldn't get my thoughts. I really couldn't get anything out there until I started podcasting. Podcasting really helped me find my voice and find a unique way for me to express my ideas. And I do it in a pretty like non-threatening, funny. I have a lot of humility. I like to take a lot of pot shots at myself, and I feel like podcasting is a great medium for that. If you have some ideas that might not be the norm, podcasting is just a great place for that. Now, finding an audience for that's a whole other. I mean, the business side of it, building the business and building the audience. It takes a lot of education. It takes a lot of trial and error. I mean, we have tried things on Good as in the Details that have worked. We've tried things that has not worked, and not every single episode is going to hit. Not every single guest is going to hit. That said, selfishly, Gwen and I learn something new on every episode, and maybe if that episode isn't a hit, we might have picked up some little nugget of knowledge that we can apply onto another episode, and then make that episode even better. And that's just like normal life. Like not every conversation that you're going to have with somebody is always you're going to get like amazing things from it. Sure. But it's just. It's a beautiful medium, and that people are so willing to this day they're honored to come on to a podcast and talk about something that they're an expert in that your audience is not an expert in. I mean, we're honored to be here, Kat. We're like, hey, this is great. We're here with you. We're loving this conversation. We want to answer any questions that you have. I mean, it's just so beautiful to have conversations with people throughout the country, throughout the world. I mean, podcasting plus Zoom plus technology, okay, all right. So maybe we're not physically in the room together, but we're together and we're expressing ideas together across. I mean, you're in Texas, we're here in California. Like it's just amazing. It's such a great thing when you can sit back and just be in awe of it.
It really is incredible. And, I'll get asked questions like, oh, are you making any money on your podcast? And for me, it's never been about that. It's about, I want to just meet interesting people, and you never know what's going to come from that. And just being open to what are the possibilities, what could come, what sort of developments could come out of it. And, I think that for me is kind of where I come from, because it makes me happy to do this. So I totally agree with what you're saying there. And how did we get to a society where people don't know how to be happy anymore? I mean, it's obviously
busy. We just get busy. We get thrown into the business of our habits, and we stop thinking and reflecting. We stop, taking a breath and being in the moment. We stop doing that. I mean, the biggest shakeup for me, I think, is that I have been in productivity mode, and I've been in that forever. And then I had my daughter. My daughter's 3.5, and I'm an older parent, and she just kind of she threw all of that, the to-do list, the productivity, the way I would measure a good day radically changed. The way I would, and I had to pay attention to that. The way I would measure a good day is how many things got done, right? And then I have my daughter, and I realized a good day is measured by connection. A good day is measured by she's alive, I'm alive. We took a walk. It was a good day. That was a good day. And I have also seen that transfer over into my everyday life. So at the end of the semester, for example, I was grading exams, and there were some thank you notes from students on the exams. And that gave me pause, because my to-do list was to think, get these exams done, get the grades done. And then I would see those thank you notes, and I would think, it almost made me want to cry, because it put me back into that space of, wait a minute, this is about connecting with people. This is about gratitude, of being part of somebody else's intellectual growth. That's what this is about. The money and the business side is the beautiful byproduct of starting with a foundation of connecting with people and then connecting with ourselves. So I have kind of proposed scrapping a to-do list and thinking about how you want to be. And you'll notice that the doing is implied. But if I say, I want to be a great friend, I want to be a good mother, I want to be a great podcaster, I want to have great content, I want to be a great professor, I want to be a great writer. The doing is implied in all of that, but it anchors in a sense of self. And I think that when you're saying, like, where did we lose our sense of happiness? I think it is because we've lost a sense of self, and we're focusing on the doing instead of why we are here and practicing this in the first place.
Yeah, there's an exercise that I run my clients through that I call productive and fulfilled. And so I have them write down a list of like everything that they've got that day, that week, whatever the timeline is. And then I have a mark on them, like, after you complete this exercise, whatever that activity is, do you feel productive? And then taking that list of productive, which ones do you do that then you feel fulfilled doing? Yeah. And it's like, how can you do more of these activities in your daily life? Because you're just automatically going to have a better energy as you go through things, feeling more fulfilled and feeling productive. And then the things that didn't tick either of the boxes, how can we eliminate? How can we automate? How can we delegate? How can we innovate? What can we do with those things to make them a little bit better to take on? But, you mentioned in the previous discussion about the trial and error. So what sort of, and I think that is a business journey. No matter what sort of business you are going to have trial and error, and it's not about the failures. It's about getting back up after the failures. So what sort of things do you wish you had known, or what advice would you give to someone starting out in podcasting now?
Besides, you should have started 10 years ago. That's a really good question. I mean, there's the basics, right? Like, learn SEO, like learn how you title your episodes is really, we're learning now how important that really is, and getting feedback from audience members that have said that we've been adjusting the titles of our episodes, and they've been like, oh, it's been great. Like, it's when now that you have been a little bit more specific about the episode, like we got a better understanding of it, and we click on it a lot easier. So that's like number one, like titling episodes for search engine optimization. And number two, don't do it for the money. Do it because you want to get something out of it, like knowledge. Do it because you want to meet new people. Do it because you want to become a better conversationalist. Do it because you have a passion for it. Because if you're doing it for the money, I'm not saying that there isn't any money in it. Sure, there is money in podcasting, but in order to make money very quickly on it, you have to spend an incredible amount of money, like something like, in the six figures, in order to make money kind of immediately. So I think you should do it because it's a passion of yours. And if it's a passion, then you will do it even if the money is not there. So how do I say this nicely? Don't quit your day job immediately, but do it because you're gaining personal growth from it. I hope that's helpful.
I think so. I mean, taking it in is a hobby, and any money that comes in, it's just, wow, what a bonus.
I would say, I think I've even told my students this, that people who are successful have just failed more than you. So we've done over the years, we've done tweaking, we've asked for feedback. I think that anyone who's starting out in podcasting, it might be a bit of a pain, but you've got to share your podcast with your closest friends and then ask them what they think. And so over the years, we've tweaked things. We've thought, oh, okay, this sounds a bit better when we have the intro this way, or it sounds a bit better when we have this kind of a flow or this kind of an outro. And that just makes you better, but you can't be afraid to get started. So sometimes if somebody listens to season 1, we have fantastic guests, but sometimes he and I, maybe we didn't have the same flow or rhythm, and you just have to not be afraid to get started and to figure out your way. And I would say also for anyone starting podcasting, one of the best pieces of advice is to listen to podcasts of all different calibers, of the big ones that are put out by, let's say, Wondery, which are just fantastic podcasts, to the indie podcasts. And I would say do that so you can get a sense of the flow in the same way that, writers read or athletes train. If you want to do podcasting, you need to listen to podcasts. And then the other stuff will actually come a bit easier because you'll get a sense of what works and you'll get a sense of what you really enjoy. Pay attention to how somebody does the intro. Pay attention to the types of questions that somebody is asking. I know that Rudy and I, for our podcast, we do the editing process. We'll edit out long pauses and ums. And that is really to make sure that the guest shines. And I think that with podcasting and with any other profession, I think a sense of gratitude needs to be the foundation. And one of the ways that we show our gratitude is that when somebody shows up on our show, we understand, if they wrote a book, we've read it, we understand that guest. And we also honor their time by making sure that when the episode is posted, that we make it the best version of the conversation. So I think that a sense of gratitude is important in podcasting, but in every avenue of life when it comes to business, because that will really make the connections stronger. And that's what you want. Like I said, the money is the byproduct of the connection and the fulfillment, like what you say you go over with your clients.
Absolutely. And I think as more people can understand that going after the happiness, that the rest will follow. And we focus on the money so often, and it's the byproduct. That's definitely why it comes after the fact in most cases.
Well, so you said you started podcasting, you were just like, wait a minute, but was there a podcast that you got hooked on? Mine was Serial.
Nope. I just started.
Nope. Oh my goodness.
I mean, I would meet these amazing people because I was just always meeting people, and it would turn into kind of an interview because I was just curious and wanting to learn more about it. And I thought, man, this is like interesting stuff. Other people might be curious about this. And so I just started.
Yeah, it's been, I think it's going to be also the new blogging. Remember how everybody with every business is like, you have to have a blog, you have to have a website. And now I know more and more people in business they're saying like they'll do 5 to 10 minute podcasts to talk about their, whatever their business is, to be informative. And so I think it's going to be interesting how it's just really, really blossomed, where you could get anything from true crime, you can get education like what we have, or you can even work on a second language. I sometimes practice my French by listening to it in the news for like 10-minute segments. There are so many possibilities with podcasting. It's really a beautiful medium.
And I think it's also, what are we filling our brains with?
Yeah.
There's so much stuff that's not moving us forward, that's not making us happier, that's not doing anything that, if we think more intentionally, and to that point, I also think it's important to create moments of silence, because I feel like we create so much noise and distraction in our lives that we are deaf to hearing anything because it's so noisy. So like I try to make sure like my shower time is like quiet time. That's the time when I can like fully think without anything else coming in. But anytime, I'm doing the dishes, I have a farm that I live on, and, working on the farm, like I'm listening to something, whether it's a podcast now or an audiobook or something, to really move me forward and just create new pathways of thinking.
Yeah. I challenge my students to not look at their phone first thing in the morning, because what you're doing is you are either paying attention to what somebody else is doing or what somebody else thinks of you. And so that's not the best way to start out your day. And I would challenge them to just try to do just one thing that is for yourself. If it's to sit there and think, wash your face, do a yoga pose, just anything to set up your day with your own intentions, because that's also part of the failure for happiness trap, is that we grab our phones and we're just filling time with scrolling. And I'm not on a soapbox finger wagging here, right? Like, this is something that I had to intentionally set for myself, where I'm like, this is not the first thing that I'm going to do in the morning. I'm not going to set up my day wondering what other people are doing or what other people think of me. I'm going to set up my day thinking about what I want out of the day. And that's really made a change in my life, and with, the beauty of silence, and not just constantly trying to take care of boredom. We should experience boredom every once in a while. It's not such a bad thing.
It's not such a bad thing. And trust me, my kids hate it when I say you need to learn how to be bored.
Yeah, I love it.
They are not a fan. Well, I will have all of the information on how to get a hold of you and all of your links for the Good is in the Details podcast. Is there any other information that we haven't covered that you would like to share today? And we could have gone for like a whole nother hour. So I'm like wanting to break my own rule and go longer, but sticking to my 30 minutes.
I was gonna brag on Rudy's behalf, but he also writes for Forbes.com about all of his knowledge on transportation and stuff like that. So that's something for people to check out.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I bragged about that earlier, but I appreciate you double. No, Kat, really, thank you. We would, we're honored to be here. One other piece of advice I guess I would give to podcasters is, before you record, make sure that your Wi-Fi is like tip top for premium. But yeah, no, and I think the other piece of advice, and in closing, is make friends with other podcasters. And we want you to know that you're a friend of the show now, and we're going to be promoting your show, and that's very important to us. So this is like, it's a brotherhood, it's a sisterhood, it's a family, and we're honored to be on your show.
Well, I mean, the fact that both of our shows start with the good, like, that seems like a pretty big sign.
Totally.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you both for being here. Thank you, listeners, for being here. If you liked this episode, please check out what Gwendolyn and Rudy are doing. Please like and subscribe this podcast and theirs. And we look forward to coming to you next time. Till next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.